So, welcome back to another community gathering event. It's been a while. We had a little break in August, but now we're back with very exciting topics and ideas until the end of the year. And this is one of those, right? Futures and foresight. So, for the ones of you who may not know, these community gatherings are sessions that we have once a month to get a glimpse of what some topics on the systems change arena is and how we approach them, right? There are several different approaches that one can start with, but this is just how we approach those topics. And we really welcome your inputs and your insights on how we share our ideas here. And as I mentioned before, topics that you'd like to contribute and see more often are very welcome as well. So without any further ado, let's get started. So our agenda for today, we're going to cover what is futures and foresights, and generally, why is it important for us to be talking about these topics? And why is it something right now that we're bringing back to the discussion, right? This is not a very new topic, but we're bringing it back to organizational context, let's say, and systems change context. So it's good to understand why that is. And well, one example on my side, but of course, you're all welcome to share examples from your work as well, or your experience. And then I'll pass it over to you for you to share any insights on how these ideas can be applied in your area of work expertise, your research, interest areas, and so forth. So this is generally what we're going to do today. And okay. And I will start with a question that it may be, well, you'll feel you'll feel the question, but it's something that it can be tricky or not, but I would like you to give me some examples as well on which one of those you think has more influence on the present, the past, the past events, or the future events, and why that is. And because, of course, of the topic that we are covering, it can be quite biased, but generally, which one of those do you think has more influence? Anyone would like to start with any general thoughts? Okay.
I will always, so I can go.
Yes.
Yeah. I will always, thanks a lot, Yasmin. I always think of the future from the present space, because I know that the future is created by the present. But looking at the questions that you are asking now, because it's all centered around the present, I will think both ways, in the sense that if we are here, it's because there is a journey that we followed to get here. And that is often informed by the past. And we use the pretend that we see the things that happen presently to now reflect with what happened in the past, but also what happened in the past is creating the present that we have, and it's influencing the decision that we make, how we think, our belief. And often that also influences the actions that we take, which now create the future that we have. That's how I would answer that question.
Nice. Maria, yes.
Following, I think I would say, for me, it's all about the perspective. From my, as you say, I'm learning more and more that it's the future. that can influence our present. But I can say I am still very much, and I have a lot of work to do in order of not being conditioned by the past, in the sense that the past can be both a blessing in the sense and or I can't find the word
Curse.
when you feel like you're stuck in the past. But I think it's all about our view, how we see, how we write the story. I would say that the stories of the past, ideally, this is ideally, I'm not saying this is what's happening today, but ideally, or what I would work towards is to be, to learn from the past and rewrite the story influenced by the future. That for me would be a nice shift in perspective.
Awesome. Okay, Linda, if you want to share any examples as well, that would be good.
Yeah, for me, hearing the contribution from Asen and Maria, it actually made me reflect a little bit. And I thought to myself that, yeah, both the past and the future have an influence on the present, because most of the time you realize that I think a lot of people, a lot of us do what we're doing now because there's something that we desire for the future. So it's basically like trying to pull the future here. And so you act a certain way, and that informs the present. And the past as well kind of informs, I think, like Asen said, there's a journey there. There's a lot that has already happened for us to be where we are today. So for me, both have an influence on the present. Yeah.
Cool. Brayden.
Just to add to what Linda was saying, like there's also not just the aspect of like what you desire for the future, there's also the anticipation aspect. So like a lot of people will make, for example, economic decisions based on what they anticipate the future will be like, and that's where you get like self-fulfilling prophecies from, where or like the sense of like perceived scarcity, and then that then drives scarcity. So it's like your perception of what the future would be impacts then how you act, and it just becomes like this endless cycle.
Awesome. Wow, so much. Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for the contributions. I would like to start with this question because I normally hear people talking a lot about the past influencing the present. So, oh, I am here because this happened to me before, or I grew up like this, and therefore I am like I am today, or this happened yesterday and I'm feeling very stressed out today, or whatever. But in the same way that all of you said, the future influences how our state of being right now, influences how we are going to organize ourselves and how we would like things to move forward and so forth. Because both of them are actually stories that we create for ourselves. We had one of these community gatherings on narratives before, and I can share the link to the recording for the ones who haven't participated. But in the same way that we talk about the stories of the past, we talk about the stories of the future. And I find that a lot of people that I talk with don't consider the future as much as an influence on the present moment, as much as they find the past to be an influence on who we are today, right? And I wanted to just bring back, one of the quotes that we used in our previous session on the narratives, that it's basically, we organize ourselves around stories, either from the past or for the future, or as Brayden was saying, the anticipation is a story. What is going to happen tomorrow? right? Or what is going to happen in 10 years? These are all unknowns, right? That we create a story around so we can organize ourselves and be able to be better equipped to deal with what we don't know, right? And as it's saying here, the narrative is a conventional form transmitted culturally and constrained by each individual's levels of mastery and by his conglomerate of prosthetic devices, colleagues, and mentors, and so forth. So a very classic example of how stories really influence the way that we are today is our human brain, right? And our, let's say, our more ancient part of our brain, that in this case, we don't know what is behind the bush, right? Anything, the bush is shaking. What is it? We have no idea. But we need to be able to find ways to, whatever happens behind the bush, we need to be aware and prepared for. So we can create stories of, it's just the wind, right? There's nothing behind the bush. And then that will make the present in one way to feel, for example, we feel calm right now. We feel, oh, relief. Oh, it's nothing to be very scared of. Or joy, okay, there's a nice breeze. We can just continue our day. But we still don't know what's behind this bush. We're just creating some type of an understanding and prediction of what that could be. So that future idea of what it is influences our present state, right? But we can think that it is a danger, it is a lion. So that's going to make us in the present to feel completely different, right? We feel alert. Maybe we need to be ready to fight and so forth. We need to be focused. So just because we thought about the future, we created a story about the future in two different ways, our present state changes completely, right? And that's very true for this example, but this is very true in organizations, in family contexts, in whatever it is. How many times something happened to you and you're talking to someone and then you were already prepared for a tough conversation. And then you arm yourself around, oh, this is going to be a tough conversation. I need to be ready to defend myself. And then you don't even hear the other person. And a lot of things happen that changes the way that we are present right here, right now, right? Because of this anticipation. So this is in some ways a way to deal with this unknown, as I said before. So good quote here from the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation. The future is not a fully formed knowable entity which exists objectively somewhere else. Futures are mental models and stories we believe about the future. We all have these mental models, whether we realize it or not. So I think the best way for us to do is to be aware that we organize ourselves around stories. And the future is one way to organize stories about this unknown, this unknowable entity here. So any questions or comments so far? Anything that seems a bit off? Or do you agree? Not agree? Yes. Maria, yes. Cool. So yeah, is this a feedback loop, right, of the present that influences the future, and how we view the future influences the present, and realizing that this is a lot of ways how we organize ourselves is very important for us to think about organizations, about teams, about projects, right? If we believe that the team that we have around us is going to be really successful, if this is a true representation of how you feel the future is going to be, then there are actions that are going to happen at the moment that we may not be aware of. That is maybe an unconscious behavior that will lead to outcomes that, as Braden was saying, the fulfilling prophecies and the confirmation biases that we create, that are going to bring us closer to this desirable or not desirable, depending, future, right? So this is quote. There is another resource that I left in the end of this presentation. This TED Talk by Lois Damhoff. She's an expert on futuring, and she says in her presentation that it's not just about what we do today that shapes the future. It is also how you look at the future that shapes the present. So going back to that feedback loop idea. Okay. So why futures and foresight at the moment? Why is it an important topic for us to talk about? And this area actually started to be developed around the World War II, where the battles happening and wars and so forth. And of course, military, there's a lot that we can learn from the military planning and military structures. And one of the things that they've realized is that you can never know what is going to happen in the battlefield. Never. You can have all the research, you can have all the tools, you can have everything that you need, but you never know what's going to happen. So because of this realization, there's a different way for you to approach war and battlefields and so forth, that you need to be, of course, prepared with the skills, develop the skills. But once you're in the situation, you can never predict, because the likelihood of that not happening is huge, right? So it's always dealing with what is happening right now in the best way that you can, and without just going completely prepared for something, right? And this is how the idea of the futuring started, and foresight started to be developed. And around the 60s, we saw this idea or this area of research and knowledge and understanding to start entering the business world, right? So you have your team around you, you have all the different sectors in your organization, you want to close the deal with the other organization and so forth, but you never really know what's going to happen, right? Because the person that you're going to close the deal with may not be in a good mood, and that's going to change everything. Or maybe something else happened to the other person and onto the other organization. Maybe they're going through a tough financial moment, and that's going to change their plans on how to close deals and so forth. So it's the same idea of unknown territories that we go through, unknown context that we go through. And we can create the possible scenarios of what that can look like, but we never really know for sure what's going to happen, right? And this is an important topic that this area brought, that instead of prediction or very closed and very straightforward prediction, we have foresight, which is planning and preparing for possible multiple futures and multiple scenarios that are going to possibly develop, right? So here, what we know today in this very straightforward linear perspective, we have what we know today here, and then we literally just forecast and say, we need this, we need that equipment, we need that amount of money to do this and that. And here we have everything organized, we have everything planned, and we just execute, right? Here in the foresight, we have here what we know today, but then there are uncertainties, there are unknowns, there are several different categories and several different ideas and features that we may not be aware of. They're going to change how these possible scenarios here are going to play out. And this is a completely different way of approaching situations, right? Here we are prepared for a multiplicity of outcomes. And here we're just focusing on one outcome, right? So leaving this very linear scenario here to a more open and more open scenario where different outcomes can emerge from. Does it make sense? Yes. Nodding heads. Great. So Foresight is a great tool because it helps organizations to investigate and not predict the future. And here we are open for difficulties to emerge. We don't judge the difficulties straight away, right? We are open for negative outcomes or different outcomes to come up. And we are going to be more, let's say, prepared for that to happen and to develop in a more natural way rather than a wrong prediction. And then we judge the prediction and then everything else is a mistake. And we cannot make mistakes because we have a budget, because we have goals to achieve and so forth. But here we are open for these mistakes to be learning opportunities, right? This is a good quote from the Future Station that I left the resource in the end. And yeah, we had our first community gathering session was about why complex problems are complex. I can leave the link to the recording for you as well. But we talked about this then, that at the moment we are living in a very complex world of increasing, not just complex, but of increasing complexity and of perceived complexity as well. And because of this understanding that we can't really predict even our weather forecast, right? We can't even tell what is going to happen tomorrow because everything might change. We've realized that this command and control, very linear way of thinking about organizations and industries and so forth is very limited. So with the increased environmental concerns, with the increase of technological advancements, social inequality, and all the different societal, political, environmental challenges that we're facing at the moment, this very linear perspective only take us so far. So if we really want to be able to deal with this complexity, we need to have different tools and different approaches to move ahead in this very, let's say, messy world that we're living. And the Futures and Foresights is one of those tools that makes us a lot more aware of the environment that we're in right now and how these stories about the future actually influence how we prepare for what might come up, right, that we don't actually know. So that's why this topic of Futures and Foresights, is starting to emerge a lot more at the moment. And another quote from Daniel Wall, rather than trying to manage the system through a command and control approach, as it were from the outside, Foresight and Future Consciousness invite us into a new awareness and practice of living the questions as embodied participants. So it's really about using all these tools and becoming a different person and creating a new awareness of what the future could be and what the future could look like, and therefore what our present reality really, how different it can be. So I can see you put something here in the chat. Oh, for the videos. Thank you. Thank you. And I will stop here, and I would like to ask you about some of these foresights. Did you come across any examples on how this foresight or this, let's say, knowledge of possible scenarios, how it makes sense in your work or in your area of expertise, research, or how that could actually be important for you? Any examples of that? I have one example, but yeah, Linda,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I was hoping somebody else was gonna start. But yeah, I just wanted to give an example of the research that we have been working on using strategic foresight. It has been quite exciting, especially the workshop part of it, like working with participants in that research to actually map out those possible futures. So what was interesting for me in one of the tools that we used in the workshop, which is the futures wheel, was when we're looking at a very important question for civil society organizations at the moment, which is the shrinking funding. So now participants now we're trying to figure out like how are things going to look like from now, and asking those those questions, like you rightly say in the previous spot you mentioned about leaving those questions. And I think for me it was like using those tools and learning how to actually come up with some recommendations to say, I think this is the way that we can try this path. It may lead us to this particular result. Was quite exciting. So yeah, it's just one example of one tool that we used in that research.
Awesome. And yeah, this is a very good point, right? The questions rather than certainties. Because the more we realize that what is going to happen in the future, we really don't know. We can have some idea. Then we realize how important the questions that we make today are important to support us with what might happen in the future. And the better the questions that we ask, the more we can see the unseen, or see what it's not there yet, or maybe the blind spots, what we might be missing out. And this is a lot more important than the certainties and the answers, right? That can take us so far. And then after the answers, what else do we have? More questions, right? So
Yeah.
this is very, very good, Linda. Thank you. Arsene.
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin, for this beautiful presentation and finding a simple way to introduce this concept. Just to also mention, and this I'm picking up from the previous questions that you asked about whether, like, where do we situate ourselves from the past and the future, and which one influence the present. I was reflecting on the engagement that Linda just mentioned, as we were engaging civil society to imagine, to understand what they're going through now, what challenges they're facing in supporting the advancement of the democratic governance agenda in their countries. So the issue of funding was one. But as we started with the process of challenging our assumptions that we often have. And because I believe personally that every work needs to start from there. So working with the mental model, and I see you mention it. You mention it in your presentation, which is very good, because what happened is, because we are living in this ever changing world that is moving, things are moving in a very fast pace. Actors, what we learned was they were also receiving large volume of information, and they're still getting it every time it's being presented to them. But because the mind relies on the pre-existing mental model, a large portion of it is processed with, we figure that they were processing it subconsciously, and that was influencing even the perception that they had on certain issues. So working with the mental model was really useful, and we used the Pollack game to get them to be able to challenge those thoughts, those perceptions that they have, the belief that they have on why their role is becoming difficult versus how the institutions are operating, how the government is structured, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the exercise, what was interesting was that people started shifting their thinking and started seeing things in a different way. And to me, that was good. It was essential, because when you start dealing with the mental model, you start with getting people to discover themselves, get to challenge how they think. And then from that, now you move to the space of now looking at the environment within which they are operating. And that's kind of, you mentioned it very well in your presentation, which I feel like, yeah, good, and I thought I should share things.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Arsene. Just a quick comment on that. The difficulties of challenging our preconceived ideas about the world, right? This is tough, to say the least. We have very ingrained ways of navigating this complexity, and the questions actually wobble a bit these structures. And once that it's a bit challenged, then we feel like our identity is challenged as well, right? But as you said, without changing these structures, we won't really be able to see what else. We won't be able to see the possibilities, because we're very limited beings, right? And we see things in a specific way. And the more we participate in other activities, the more we talk with people, the more we question, the more our sense of who we are gets a bit challenged. But it's very important, because the other side of it is seeing wider and having more awareness of the possibilities that could be, the blind spots and so forth. So this is very, very good, Sin. Thank you for sharing. Braden.
I kind of want to build on a bit to sort of the implications for what, as we talked about before, the future very much is like the amalgamation of how our present actions, manifest in yet another present moment. So it's very much something that is actively being created, whether consciously or subconsciously. So I feel like when you're thinking about foresight, I feel like that's something that you should really not just like consider, but actively work to manipulate. So if like not just mental models are definitely a key component of that, as Arsene was saying, but it's also like understanding to what extent that sort of like, how much control do you actually have and how much control do you not have? And sort of, obviously that's like a very like black and white question, but like there are certain things that you can do to then influence the future and then make it so that like mitigating against things that can, instead of just trying to predict the future, it's like, okay, if you're trying to steer the future in a specific direction, what actions can you take in the present to then increase the probability that that future will emerge, and then, you know, reverse engineer that to current building of mental models, actions, things like that. So it's sort of like it's a back and forth relationship between the future and the present, and even looking at examples from the past to see how that ended up working in practice.
Yeah, I love that, Braden. Thank you. And going back to that that slide of the future and the present and so forth, I think this is quite important, that we really, to some extent, right, create the future. It's not something that it's there and we go and grab it, right? It's something that emerges and that is, as you're saying, manipulated to some extent, that we can create some actions now to then be closer to that idea of the future that we would like to create. So one example that I have that I really like this example is, there's a case study from the Amsterdam City Council that I think I shared this in here before, that they wanted to tackle urban childhood obesity. And the way to do that they found was to use more systems thinking and complexity perspectives, rather than, this is a health issue, let's just deal with the health situation, the health component, and put a lot of money there, and that's it, right? What they did, they brought a lot of different stakeholders together. They created some type of a multidisciplinary plan and so forth that would see obesity as let's say, the symptom of a very ingrained structure that is there to, let's say, to have the childhood obesity as a consequence of the structures that are already in place, right? So seeing something different, creating a different story about what childhood obesity is, made them realize that just giving money to hospitals or whatever is not going to do anything, right? So what else can we do right now to gather to have a future in which childhood obesity is not a symptom anymore of the system that we are part of, right? So this changed completely the tools that we're going to use today and how we're going to deal with comes up right now, because the scenario is different than just it's a health problem, right? So I think this example is great for a lot of different reasons, but the story about what childhood obesity is and what we can do right now to achieve a healthier environment in the future is a different way of manipulating the tools and resources that we have right now. But it's a great remark. Thank you, Braden. Elisa.
Yeah, thank you so much for this framing and resources. It's really helping me, put words on things, and giving me some references to look at. So yeah, the way I work with this is I'm a designer, and I also facilitate a kind of system sensing process. So trying to get people, more into this like sensing mode. And so I often do a scenario where we, create a kind of like living map of future scenarios and get people to try to kind of sense into them and sense relationships. And Another favorite one is having, putting on the map a representative for the plannable future, or like my plans, or I think you called it, maybe this is what you were calling, like, yeah, prediction, like the agenda basically that an organization is trying to push through. And then to also put up kind of a placeholder for the future, or the emerging future, the future that's kind of coming towards you, that you don't know what the heck is going to happen, and has that element of unpredictability. And yeah, it's always like such a fun exercise to do with people, because so often just to see to what extent those are aligned. And so anyway, that's how I'm working with it these days.
That is beautiful. Thank you. Well, I would just give some moment as well for us and Linda to share, but there's going to be a workshop on strategic foresight on the 10th. And it's really about, now it's just a very general idea of what this area is. And then how can we actually do that in practice, right? What are the different tools that are important to then steer a bit of this future, right? Or steer the present towards something closer to the future that we want to see, and so forth. So it would be great to hear more about your experience on this area as well, because I mean, it's endless, right?
No, I would love to join.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put the link here in the chat. And I have I have a question, and I see that Linda has a question here as well. What power does imagination has in this area? And another question that I had was, is there a downside of foresights and futuring? Is there something that could go in a completely different direction? Or is there, just difficult? What are the difficulties of applying some of these topics and workshops and so forth? Can you think about any downsides of this framework or this idea? Yeah, thank you, Arsen, for putting the link here. Right, everything is great about futuring foresights. And Maria.
I think like in every approach we take with whatever tools we have, I think the downside, especially when it comes epistemic approach, which foresight is one of them, might be not being aware of or including, because you mentioned workshops, so I'm just putting it, giving it some context, because it could be grounding it in a way, would be not including the participants in the systems that we're addressing, whatever issue we're addressing. So not being aware, because it might be, you can unwittingly, or by omission, not realizing that you're missing. So that would be a downside, because or not working or balancing the forces of power within the system. Also, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, giving more weight, let's say, to some scenarios, some possible scenarios, and some ideas of what could be, rather than others, and then that can create some type of a,
like, without even meaning, directing the outcome. in a way, unintentionally.
A very, very good point, Maria. Arsene.
Yeah, so I will answer by giving an example of how the traditional foresight used to be done, especially when it started, where mostly big companies, organizations, big companies who were using it, and it goes back to the slide that you showed earlier on about predictive. So they will use foresight to say, okay, we have to deal with this in the future, and they get experts to say that, how do we go about it? So the action now becomes limited in the sense that people start focusing more on how do we react to the future, or what do we do differently? And that was limiting the strategy part of it. And that's why more and more we now start talking about strategic foresight, because now when we talk about doing foresight in a different way that is strategic, now you start to think of bringing data, not wiping out the existing data, but taking it into consideration, trying to understand what the data means now, engaging with perspectives, like we said, and from allowing that diversity of perspective and perception, and also, as I said, getting people to challenge their belief. So, and that's create a kind of possibility, so that whichever solution that you want to do in the future, or not solution, but whatever future you want to create, you create it in a way that allows multiple scenarios from the possibilities that emerge into that process. So I think that's something that was there in the past, but I see more and more people are changing it. They're now starting to talk more about strategies and bringing systems thinking, like Maria was saying, getting to use tools that now get us to have a proper understanding of the system before you intervene. Because everything that, as we were saying, it's happening now, and the present is happening in a space that is structured, where a structure is operating in a certain way that is also influenced by other stuff, like how people think, and so on and so forth. So combining those two and then bringing that kind of strategy, allowing data and bringing data, allowing various perspectives, and creating a room for possibilities is what is being now making this this topic or this concept more to evolve a bit, and drive kind of change that is more transformative. That's the word I was looking for. Thanks.
Nice, thank you. I think it's that
Yeah.
balance, right, between going too broad and too holistic and too all the possibilities are there, and there's one possibility only, and that's what we're going to do tomorrow. So it's a bit of this balance, right? And before Linda, I just wanted to give the word to Amber, who I think was replying a bit to what Maria was saying. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Would you like to expand a bit more on that?
Oh, it was basically exactly what Maria was saying, how whether it's conscious or not, it's about the person who speaks up, gets the attention. They're the ones that make the move. They're the ones that, I mean, it doesn't need to be actually with your voice, but it's whatever draws the attention, gets the attention, kind of a thing. And that is a force of its own. And it's also massively part of the complexity because it's woven into everything.
Amazing. Yeah. Sometimes just the status, right, speaks louder than the words, or the, I don't know, the expertise, sometimes years of experience and blah, blah, blah. And then
or the no experience with the title.
Yes,
My
the
favorite.
title is the king of whatever, and then what is this person does? Nothing really. So yeah, these these speak very, very loud, and then we don't let these people participate appropriately, right, in this space. That's a very good point, Amber. Thank you. Linda.
Oh yeah, I wanted to raise a point related to participation, like you mentioned, to say maybe one of the things that could be like a downside or maybe a weakness is related to participation, because when you're looking at, for example, mapping and thinking about the future and all the tools that we use and everything, it's about who is actually involved in that, like who's there. So like I'll give an example. You mentioned the example of the child obesity, and I would be curious to know whether there were children involved. They were experts, but were the children part of that conversation? So yeah, I think that's one thing that even us at Triasa, we're trying as much as possible to put into practice and make sure that we have the people who are actually involved in that particular a topic or concept or whatever it is that we're discussing, to get those insights, to ask those questions, for them to even start also imagining what the future would look like.
Yeah, I love that. We always bring the salvation to others, but we don't include their voices, right? Just listen to me. I know what I'm talking about, and you can just eat what I'm saying, and that's it. So yeah, that's another one of the loud voices, right? I saw a graphic recently that it was exactly like that. It's like people in an island, and there's like aid, everything that you need on a parachute, and then the person's like anymore. Like these people that just throw help around, but they don't even ask if the person needs help. It's just great. So yeah, there's loads of those, right? Thank you, Linda. That's very important reminder of things to pay attention to. Cool. So for 2 minutes to the end of the session, I'll give the space for Linda and Arsene to share a bit of the workshop on strategic foresight. I'll put the link here again. Really, really recommend joining, but yes, leave the space for you to share a bit about that.
Thanks, Yasmin. The workshop is taking place on the 10th of October. And whenever we speak about workshop, we think of contribution, where we put our hands together to imagine something or to work on something. So we will use the opportunity, we will use the Miro board to just throw our ideas. We'll explore some tools that are useful in doing strategic foresight. What I would like to ask is for us to invite people, so that if we have more thoughts in the room, the workshop will become quite interesting. We facilitated 2 workshops recently on strategic foresight, one in the DRC and one in South Africa, but with a small group. And I was part of a workshop, a strategic foresight workshop with a larger group, like over 50 people. And I saw how rich it was in content and how even the use of the tools was quite exciting. So I feel like for the workshop to be really nice, we need to bring more people. So please, if you've got few people that you can invite who will be interested. Before the workshop is already advertised, so we'll be providing more information. We will select, maybe we'll use the community to get your thoughts on that. We will come up with a particular topic or a seed for the future that we can explore. And we will use that seed to work using various strategic foresight tool. And it's going to be nice because we will use the systems change framework. It will start with discovering the stuff that I was saying, and moving to now exploring stuff like scanning, until we get to the application of the tool. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So yeah, I put the link here again on the chat. And yeah, we'll hopefully see you all then on the 10th with lots of practice and inputs and brain work and body work and mind work generally. With all of you.
Exactly.
A lot of work.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
work.
work.
Thank you so
Cool.
much, Yasmin.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
was
everyone for
great.
joining.
Yeah, great to
Thank
meet you
you.
all. Thank you.
And
Okay,
yeah, see
bye-bye.
you very soon.
Yeah, see you
Yeah,
then.
See you
Bye.
soon.
on the
Okay,
10th.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very, very
Bye.
much. Bye.
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 Oh.